Okay, so we are learning the subject of Kashrut. Last week I loaded you with information, and perhaps a lot of it was already something you knew about, but some of it might have been new information. But that's fine. Last week was just an introduction for you to understand all the different principles that come into account when we discuss food being kasher or not kasher. Okay? And then B'ezrat Hashem will go deeper into each subject, just to give a little bit of a feeling. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview so you know how is this course built. Just 1 second. Just looking at it a second ago, yeah. So I gave you the introduction last week. Today's shiur, I'm going to concentrate on Shchita and Melicha, the slaughtering the animal and the salting of the animal. Next week, I will teach you about meat and milk, the mixing of meat and milk and everything that's connected to that, B'ezrat Hashem. Then after that, Rav Yair will take over and teach you about different mixtures, about vessels, about everything that's connected to having a kosher kitchen. Then Moshe David will teach you about taking the kelim, the mikveh, kashering kelim. How Rav Yair will teach you about kosher lists. And then the last week, we'll concentrate more on the bishul akum and the rabbinic laws that we mentioned, and the chalat, humot, masrot. I'm sure Moshe David will have a lot to say to you in June about Eretz Israel and all the special laws that apply only in Eretz Israel that I am much less familiar with. But before I start the shiur, so to subject is Shchita and Melicha, slaughtering and salting the meat. Is there any questions that have come up, either because of my shiur or because of the reading? I hope all of you have read the chapter, or perhaps because other questions on kashrut or whatever comes up. I'm happy to take them now before we dive deeper. Okay? Everybody is happy? So let's start. So, Shchita. So we mentioned it, of course, last time. Shchita is the method we slaughter animals with. Now, as you remember, as I'm sure you remember, there is different categories. How do you know an animal is kasher? Let's start with animals that move on the ground. What makes an animal kosher or not kosher?
So it should chew its cud and it should have split hooves.
Excellent. Very good. What makes a bird kosher?
Well, there is not that clear distinction between kosher and non-kosher birds. The Torah lists like a list of birds that are not kosher.
Okay. And what do we do practically? What birds do we eat?
Domesticated birds and not domesticated birds and not birds for predators, scavengers.
Right, that's correct. But basically what we do, the halacha, is we only eat birds when there's a tradition the Jews have eaten them. That's all. Because we don't know how to translate all the different names of forbidden birds. We don't want to take the risk of eating a bird that's possibly non-kosher. We don't eat birds. We don't add any new birds to our list of the birds we eat. We eat chicken, turkey, technically quail, and dove, because the Torah speaks about eating them. Don't know many people who do. Duck, of course, the Jews are always eating geese, but we don't add new birds to our eating habits. Fish, how do you know if a fish is kosher?
It should have fins and scales.
Excellent. And there's one type of insect that not very common, but is kosher. what it is?
Grasshoppers. Grasshoppers.
Sorry?
Grasshoppers.
Grasshoppers or locusts, right? So there's some. The distinctions are quite complicated. So basically, most Jews in the world don't eat grasshoppers. I don't know how much there is to eat them anyways. Now, when it comes to the halacha, to the practice, fish, and well, if you know a kosher grasshopper, but those are simple because when you eat fish, you take it out of the water, kill it, you can eat it. Yeah, there's no special rules on how to kill the fish, right? Obviously, yes, whatever, you shouldn't cause pain more than necessary, but there's no specific method. Fish is kosher if it's a kosher, sorry, not if the fish is a kosher species of fish, you can eat it the way you want to eat it. Okay, that's very, very makes life a lot easier because that means that you can buy fish in a store, right? Very, very useful and practical. As long as you can see fillet, you can see the scales on it. And as we remember, we mentioned a fish that has scales always has fins. Yeah, not the other way around. There are fish which have fins but don't have scales. But there's no such thing as a fish which has scales but does not have fins. So if you go to the counter on a shop and you see the scale, a slice of fish with scales on it, you can buy it. You can wash it, just to be safe in case they've used the knife with other fish which are not kosher, whatever. Give it a wash, and it's good to go. You can eat it. There's nothing else you need to worry about. The problem is meat. Meat, we have very specific laws what to have to do before the meat is kosher. You have a kosher animal, but it doesn't mean it's the food that's going to come out of it is kosher. What do you need to do to this kosher animal? What do you have to do to it? What is it called?
You have to kill it. Slaughter.
Yeah. Slaughtering. Does anybody know what's the Hebrew word for this special Jewish type of slaughtering?
Shchita.
Shchita. Excellent. Now, I'm going to show you a text from the Torah. This is, as you can see, in Dvarim, in the 5th book, and it is chapter 12, verse 21. Chapter 12, verse 21. Who would like to read? Do you have a volunteer?
I can.
Okay, so just to tell you first the context, what is this about? What are we talking about? This chapter is discussing when God is telling Moses, the Jewish people, Moses telling Jewish people, when you get to the land, of course, in the desert, they only ate meat when it was a sacrifice, which was slaughtered in the tent of meeting. But now you're going to move to Eretz Israel, and then you're going to have a lot of land. You're not always going to come to the temple to sacrifice, but you'll be allowed to eat meat in your own house, right? Wherever you are, in Galilee, far away from Jerusalem. But it says here, the place which Hashem shall choose, it will be far. Oh, so wait. Which one is given thee? Oh.
So can I begin?
Please.
Yeah, if the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to put his name, there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of the herd and thy flock which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat with thy gates after all the desire of thy soul.
Very good. So sorry, I brought a more modern translation with ancient English, but what's important here is this sentence. As I have commanded thee. In Hebrew, kasher tiviticha. This is the main point here. The Torah says when you live far away from Yerushalayim, So you can eat meat, you will kill of thy herd, from your herd and from your flock, from your animals, from your sheep, from your cows. How? The way I have commanded you. Now, this is very interesting. If it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah any rules how to do it, it just says here, do it the way I commanded you. From here, we have one of the strongest proof for the Torah shebe'al peh, for the oral Torah. It means God said a lot of things to Moshe, which are not written in the Torah, right? So it means God dictated the Torah letter for letter to Moshe, but he also taught him lots of other things, and that's called Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah, which was kept from teachers to students over centuries, and only in the times of the Mishnah it was written down. So the method of Shchita was taught by Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he passed it on to the Shochatim with time. And in the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud, these were written down, but they're oral laws, right? I'm not a shochet. I cannot give you a complete lecture on all the specificities and all the laws and all the halachot of Shchita. I don't know them so well. But to get a basic idea, what it tells in the Shulchan and the Talmud and all our sources, you need, first of all, you need a Jew. You need a religious Jew who keeps Torah and mitzvot. And he takes a knife, which has to be perfectly sharp. Actually, it has to check it. Part of the process is checking the knife. It's a whole process. There are no serration, no bumps, no nothing. A perfect sharp blade. And he cuts, he says the bracha, and he cuts the throat in one go. It cuts immediately, it has to cut the windpipe and the food pipe, majority of both, in a cow. And that is Shchita, right? There was a lot of talk last time, I remember, about how it's best for the animal, or it's this and that. You know, there is a lot of scientific study about it, and it does seem also very logical. When you cut there the throat, you know, the nerves go, the blood goes, so the animal has very little time to think. He's already dead, right? So it does make sense that the amount of pain and suffering should be very, very low. But it's important to know that that's not the reason why we do it that way. We do it this way because this is the way Hashem passed on to Moshe and passed on the Torah, and this is the way you have to do it, right? It might be some side reasons in it as well. We don't know, but this is the way I have to do it. And if Shchita has not been done by a religious Jew, according to all the halachot that the shochet has to learn, the animal is a nevela. And the meat that comes out of that animal is not kosher. It's the same as eating pork. There's no difference, right? So it's very, very important to know. And that's why, what was I going to say? That is a big part of the kosher certification, to have shochatim who know what they're doing, who are observant people, yirei shamayim, and to keep the system, to have a proper system. Now I can see a raised hand. Please, Daniel S. Bakasha.
Yes, does the process need to be performed by, or does the slaughter need to be performed by a religious Jew, or can it also be supervised by one?
Has to be a religious Jew. If he wasn't, then the Shchita, if it's a non-Jew who does the slaughtering, then definitely it's not kasher at all. And yeah,
Thank you.
I can tell, yeah. Hello? Silke, בבקשה.
Sure. I've heard that the animals don't get kind of a tranquilizer or something before that, and I just wanted to know the reason. If it is the truth, what is the reason for not giving the animal some sort of sedative beforehand?
Right, very good. So what are the issues with stunning? Again, I'm really not expert in this area, but from what I understand, the normal way they stun animals in the slaughterhouses is like sort of like an electric shock to the brain. And that can cause a certain amount of damage to the brain, and often does, which again, a normal non-Jewish person wouldn't care because he's going to kill the animal anyway straight afterwards. But in halakha, it's extremely important because if you damage the brain, you'll have made the animal a trefa. Yeah, and the trefa is not kosher to eat, right? So the animal has to be completely healthy. Any sort of thing which would damage important organs of the body will make the animal non-kosher. That's another whole world, laws of trefa. But that's the reason why we don't allow what's it called, stunning the animal before the slaughtering. Yeah.
Is it the same with kind of giving it? What is the English word for it? Kind of like giving it, not aspirin, but like giving it some sort of drug so it doesn't feel any pain before you cut the throat?
Would it be permitted to give a drug? I can't see why not. To give it a shot or something. It would have to be. We would have to know exactly that it doesn't cause any permanent damage on the animal, right? But otherwise, I can't see why not, because we do give all sorts of medicine and antibiotics to animals anyways during their lifetime. I can't see why that should be a problem. But again, I don't really know what happens in the slaughterhouses. I only know this from theory. Rebecca Ketura?
I'm not quite certain, but I think with hens and chickens, they usually gas them. So they give them some kind of sedative that makes them just fall over, and then they slaughter them. So I don't know, is that considered permissible, or is that not good?
I really don't know. It sounds like it's just something that sort of like puts them to sleep. So that shouldn't really have any permanent damage on them. I did see once a video, I think, of like Shchita of chicken on the line. They do seem quite like sleepy and drowsy. So maybe they do like sort of knock them out. I don't know exactly. But yeah, you should something to research. What exactly are the procedures and how are they done? But the stunning debate, I think in a lot of these countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, I think you can't do Shchita at all. Here in Finland, Shchita is technically permissible, but because of this stunning requirement, it's very, very complicated to do Shchita. I think they did it once, tried to slaughter some reindeer here a few years back, but basically all of the Nordic countries just import the meat from other countries which don't have the Shchita restrictions. Now, once you've slaughtered the animal, a lot of blood comes out. That's the blood of the life blood, if you want, the first blood. And that blood, obviously drinking it, eating it would be a very serious avera from the Torah. And that's part of it also. The blood goes away. The next thing, as I mentioned last time, was the checking of the trefot. Okay. And you already very nicely brought this question of the trefot. Wait a second. So what happens is that we mentioned that the Torah says, oh, there's another chat box message I can see. Okay. Okay, I don't know about that. If you eat a drugged animal. Will you get drugged? I don't know. Okay, I have to ask a doctor or a veterinarian these questions. Now, the next point is you check the trefot. So usually an animal is healthy, which assumes that it's healthy, right? That's called the chazaka, an assumption that everything is okay. Sometimes there is a reason to suspect. Yeah, it's been attacked by a wolf. It's been, it's fallen off. So then, after Shchita, you would have to do a proper check in that part of the body if there is a trefa. There's a whole list of certain things which the Chachamim knew were considered trefot, and they were passed on. And this is called trefa, and trefa means there was a tradition, and that these things are so dangerous that if this animal would not have lived more than a year with this illness anyways, right? If that's the case, then the animal was a trefa, and then even now if slaughtered and done the shchita properly, the animal is not kasher. I mentioned the last time, there's one place that's always checked, that's the lungs, and I think I mentioned quickly, but again to reiterate, the lungs, we check them, so maybe this might be something people find interesting. What is the question of glad kosher, non-glad kosher? Basically, what happens like this. Healthy lungs are smooth, right? But if there is a rupture in the lung, there's a hole somewhere in the lung, what happens is the body itself sort of creates some sort of, I don't know if it's puts them together, almost like a glue that goes on top of that hole, right? But the hole is still there. Now, sometimes that sort of bump can go on top of skin of the lung, even if there is no hole under it, right? So the lungs can be bumpy because they're actually holes, or the lungs could be not bumpy. Okay, so the lungs could be bumpy because these bumps are actually covering holes. So when they check the lungs, so there are different standards. According to Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Beit Yosef. Anybody know who Rabbi Yosef Karo is? What's he famous for?
Shulchan Aruch.
Shulchan Aruch, excellent. So he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and he was accepted by the Sfaradim. Yeah, sorry. So I'm explaining about the lungs. So the Rav Yosef Karo, he took on, it's based on Talmud or commentary, I don't know the sugyot. Basically, he took on that if the lungs have to be completely smooth, in Hebrew, chalak, if they're not completely smooth, then the lungs are not, then it's considered trefa. Was the Rema, Moshe Isserles, who wrote the glosses on Shulchan Aruch for the Ashkenazim, he said that the custom in his place in Eastern Europe was to rely on more lenient opinions and to take on that little bumps were okay, the whole method, how to check that there's no hole under these bumps and so on. And therefore he allowed when it's not completely smooth. So these are the two opinions. There's Chalak Bet Yosef being the street. Bet Yosef means Rav Yosef Karo, he's known as Bet Yosef, which is the very, very smooth lungs. And then you have Rama was much more lenient. And later, especially the Hasidim and many in the Hasidic movement, they start encouraging even Ashkenazim to keep this stricter interpretation on the lungs of the cows. And that's where comes the Yiddish expression glat. Glat just means the same as chalak. Chalak is Hebrew, glat is Yiddish, right? So you say something is glat kosher. When say something is glat kosher, what we mean to say is it is chalak. The lungs are smooth, right? And those are different things. So you will have regular kasher will not worry about this, whereas halak or glat will only let an animal pass if the lungs are completely smooth. That's different. That's why you see this in terms. Now nowadays, very often in our everyday language, we use these words, it's glat, kosher, and it just become an expression, like saying, you have a salad bar and it says glat kosher. It doesn't make any sense. Glat or halak only has to do with cows, not even with sheep, only with cows. Because once you get to sheep, you get to other. I'm sorry that we keep breaking. I don't know if the internet connection here is bad or if there's something wrong with the line. Bezrat Hashem should help everything to fall into place. So that's the concept. And another one case where you can have, again, a difference in opinion. Bezrat Hashem, in the latest shiurim, I think people will talk about kashrut and kashrut list and kashrut stamps. So very often, these type of questions come up. There might be a difference of opinion in halacha, and stricter kashrut authorities will take a stricter view. More lenient kashrut authorities will take a more lenient view, and that often is reflected in the price as well. Obviously, the stricter your rules are, the less animals pass your criteria, and the more the food will cost. So that's the world of trefot. Complicated area in halacha. Then you have removing the parts that we don't eat, right? Like I mentioned, you remove the chele, certain types of fats which are allowed to eat. You remove the gidanashe, this special. There was a bit of confusion again. Gidanashe, the sciatic nerve. It's a nerve near the pelvis, I think. And it's of the animal. As we said, this was because of the fight between Yaakov and the angel. It says in the Torah, Jewish people don't eat this gidanashe. As I mentioned last time, practically for the last 100 years, they usually just sell you the front of the animal, and then that takes a lot of work away, and you don't need as much nikul. This job to do the nikul, which the menaker does, which is removing the gidim, is extremely demanding. And often it's just easier to sell the back of the animal to non-Jews and to sell the front of the animal to the Jewish market. That's why, interestingly enough, a lot of non-Jews might actually be eating meat that has been slaughtered the kosher way. Because very often in the Shchita house, they sell a lot of stuff to non-Jewish market. They'll sell the back of the animal. If something goes wrong in the Shchita, in whatever, and it's not kosher, the laws should have very specific, if you like. Keep the knife in too long, it doesn't go smooth, or whatever it is, a lot of halachot, then you should know a shochet has to have a lot of, first it has to know the halachot, it has to have a lot of fear of God, because there's so many things in Shchita which he has to do correctly. And if he doesn't do it correctly, only he will know, because it won't show in the wound or anything. So he has to have the guts to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And this animal is not kosher. And if he doesn't say, then everybody's going to eat non-kosher meat. So it requires a lot of the fear of God to be a shocher. And then we come to the world of melicha. As I mentioned last time, in the past, melicha was very much a household job. That you bought the meat and you had to do melicha. You had to salt the meat. Nowadays, of course, already for the last 20 years or so, it's much more common, and it's done often in the factory itself, in the slaughterhouse or right in the butcher shop. It's not something you as a consumer need to worry about, thank God, but you should still be aware of the halachot to understand what happens. And you never know, you might be in a situation somewhere where they actually just sell the meat slaughtered and expect you to deal with the melicha yourself. So, again, as I explained, the lifeblood of the animal, it comes out when you cut the animal, the first blood comes out immediately. That is the that is the dam hanefesh, right? Then there is blood that's inside the meat, right? So how do you take this blood out? So you're going to do a 3-step process. There's actually 2 ways to do it. Yeah, there's 2 ways to do it. I'm gonna start with the normal case, the more common case, which is melicha, salting. There's another way to take away blood. I'll explain that to you later. But the salting process goes like this. First, you wash the meat. Then, it's more than washing. You soak the meat. You soak the meat for half an hour in water. After that, you cover it in salt. You put salt all around the meat so that the piece of meat is covered in salt from all sides. And you leave it in salt for an hour. And usually, when you do that, you put it in like a vessel which has holes in it, and you let the blood drip come out from the holes. After that, you wash off the salt from the meat. Now, this process, as I said, they've all done it before they even sell you the meat, but it has to be done usually within the first couple of days after the slaughtering. So we, of course, get frozen meat, which is not for much later on. Okay, so that is the melicha. Now, there is one other way, one alternative way to deal with the blood, which is you could roast it. You could roast it on the fire. A second. Also, let's see the lichtness on the iron. Also, the lichtness on the iron. So you could take the piece of meat and put it on the grill, on the fire, and burn it and roast it on the fire until the blood drips out, right? Usually you put a bit of salt on that as well, and then you roast it on the grill. It's a bit complicated because you'll make the grill, you make the grill, so to say, non-kosher, as in make it bloody, but that's one way of doing it. Now, if we're talking about anything else except liver, you have these 2 options. Usually they do the salting because that's more the advantage of doing salting and washing is that then you still got the raw piece of meat and you can do whatever you want with it, whether you want to cook it or roast it or whatever. If you roast it, then you're going to end up with roasted grilled meat, which is good if you want to have grilled meat, but that might not be what you want, right? But there is one item of food which the only way to make it kosher is by roasting. Salting will not help, and that is the liver. The liver has to be grilled, right? And that you do find sometimes that some people will sell raw liver. So you need to know what to do. Usually what you need to do is to have some sort of metal grill, whatever, which you only use, or like vessels, like a metal, how would I say, thing like with holes where the blood can drip out. It's only used for liver. You don't use it for anything else. And you turn on the grill and you let the blood drip out, so to say. Yeah, for example, in our community, we have a grill which which is only used for liver. Sometimes some opinions say you could do it in the oven, this grilling of the liver, and let it fall down the oven, but then you'd have to kasher the oven. It's quite a messy job. So liver has its own special rules. You have to roast the liver, and it will not help to do the normal melicha that you do for other meats. That's important to be aware of. I think nowadays, even with liver, they're moving more and more into the direction that the liver is already kasher. But it's very easy to see, because when you buy a packet, if it's kasher, it's cooked. Roasted kosher liver is cooked; it's roasted already, so there's no question really about it. You can see that it's a roast piece of liver. So this is really the world of Shchita and tzliya. Tzliya is roasting. And then at that point, you'll have your kosher piece of meat. Are there any questions at this point from the process? I mean, starting from the animal, recognizing it's a kosher animal, doing the shchita, checking the trefot, doing the nikur, removing the parts you're not allowed to eat, and then doing the melicha or the tzliya, or in the case of liver, only tzliya. Well, that's really the world of meat. Now, in consequence, because of this, and as you have understood, any meat anywhere else is completely non-kosher. And that means really that you have to be very careful when you buy anything in a regular shop that it does not contain anything animal-based, right? Because the moment there's something animal-based there, then it's not going to be kosher, right? Maybe because fish-based, it will be fine. Again, you might not be fine, because you won't know if it's from a kosher fish or from a non-kosher fish. So basically, animal-based products bought in a regular shop will, by definition, will not be kosher, right? That's the thing, and you have to be very careful. Nowadays, things are changing a bit. It used to be that almost everything had some animal fat or animal ingredients in it. Nowadays, that's much less the case. There is a whole vegan market. It's really helping us, helping Jews keep the Torah. But the person has to be careful. So that's the first thing to be aware of when you're going shopping and you're buying food. Now, there is one place where you might find animal that people don't think of often. It's in vegetables, and in fruit less. But in vegetables, you might have sometimes bugs, right? So that is actually something a person should be aware of. You have it a bit easier here in Scandinavia because it's cooler. In Israel, there can be bugs almost in anything, and it's there they even sieve the flour often because there might be bugs in the flour that they use for. Yeah, but here it's much less of an issue, but it's still an issue. Someone in the community just found a caterpillar in broccoli, right? So you have to be careful. There are you can find out online if anyone's interested. There's a very good chart, for example, from London Based In that's very useful. It's worthwhile knowing the rules. Lettuce needs to be very well washed and take a good look at it under a good light. Broccoli is often very problematic. You need to cut it. You have to soak the pieces in water, preferably slightly salted water. You should bang them to see if anything comes out in the water. Check the water. There's nothing swimming in it. cabbage, to cut it open, wash it, check it. You can get charts on the internet, you can get more information, but you should know, not because they sell something in a shop means that it's clean. It might be, it could be infested with bugs. Any bug that's visible to your naked eye is a problem. It's considered an animal in halacha, and you're not allowed to eat bugs. You should know the Torah says 5 times not to eat bugs, and only once, not twice, not to eat pork. Right? So it's a very, very serious avera, and it's something any Jew should be careful about. So that. Sorry, Cecilia, please, a question, Bakacha.
Yes, I could add to you. You could even use vinegar in the water with salt when you're using broccoli to clean it.
Ah, okay.
Etika in Sweden. Etika is a very
Etika
good thing.
and finish also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, vinegar.
Kill,
That's a good
kill
idea.
the bugs.
Yes, I can see the connection is very bad. So you mentioned that these things can kill the bugs. Be careful though, it's that you have to be able to remove the bugs. Even if they're dead, they're still forbidden to eat. So you should use whatever you use to washes them off, and you can get them off from your food. Right, so that is what you need to worry on the vegetable side. I'm just trying to think, because we've learned some theory, but how to bring it to the practice. You enter a shop, what sorts of issues can come up? So obviously, vegetables and fruit, as long as they are clean from bugs, would be kosher. If they come from Israel, you might have issues that you need to take the tithes, the Chumot and Maasot, which we mentioned. That will be your last shiur this summer with Moshe David. As I explained on the fish counter, if you can see scales, it's kosher. So that would again be fine. Usually a raw product, which has never been cooked or anything, raw nuts, if the ingredients are kosher, it'll be kosher. Once you start talking about processed products, which have been cooked, then you enter all sorts of questions, and that's where it goes the whole checking. And I'm sure in the coming shiurim they'll explain you more how do the kosher lists work, for example. But there you enter lots of questions, because you have to know, first of all, the ingredients, what's in it. Let's say the ingredient, I'll let you speak soon. I'll just finish my sentence. The ingredients, are they kosher? If the ingredients are kosher, where were they made? Is they on the same line? Let's say they cook something non-kosher together with it. That could, if you have hot contact, would do a transfer of taste. Other things that if we mentioned, there's going to be bishul akum, if a non-Jew is cooking, so that could be a problem for certain foods. It doesn't apply to all foods. You'll have a separate shiur about this subject. So once talking about food that are processed, you would need to refer to yourself to a kosher list, to something that's checked actually what is going on, because then it becomes a lot more complex. Now, somebody raised their hand just a moment ago.
Yes, that was me. So you said that fruits and vegetables are kosher no matter what, as long as you check them for bugs.
Right.
So I know there's been discussion about fruits like, I think it was raspberries and other berries, where you cannot be sure that all bugs have come out and you have no way of checking it. It's more like, what's your opinion on that?
Okay, so look, as I said, fruit is kosher if there is nothing in it. I have also heard that some of them are so hard to check, it's not worth it. Again, if you cut it open and you wash it and you look at it, then you should be, what you can see, you can see. What I think the issue with this, from what I understand, the issue with these berries is that, they're often so infested that it's like you said, it's very hard. You'll have to cut it into little pieces, and like, what are you going to do with it? So I don't know, because it depends a lot on the country. I think here we have the situation. Strawberries are quite clean, just need to wash them, and usually we like cut the tip of it, just because sometimes they're hiding under the leaves, but you wash them well and you're fine. Raspberries I've heard are quite problematic, so I don't really buy raspberries here. But you have to know what the situation is and how common or uncommon it is. Yeah, can't really say much more than that.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that's, I think, really the main points of with Thomas. Obviously, anything animal-based meat you're gonna buy in a kosher shop. Okay, maybe something that's interesting to talk about quickly. Milk. Yes, I explained there's the whole gzera, and we're gonna speak about later about Chalav Israel and checking. But before you get to that, a very important concept you should be aware of, which is called Yotze min tahor tahor, Yotze min tameh tameh. What comes out from kosher is kosher. What comes out from non-kosher is not kosher. That means to say, if you have a kosher animal, everything that comes out of it while it's alive is kosher. Its milk is kosher. If it's a kosher bird, its eggs are kosher. And that's why, obviously you can drink cow's milk, you can eat birds' eggs, kosher birds' eggs, chicken eggs, duck eggs, and so on. That is the rule, right? As I said, with milk, there's a special gzera of Chazal, because sometimes the goyim used to mix camel milk into the milk, and you'll hear a shiur about that from the following Rabbanim. But that's the core of the point. So an interesting point. Somebody once asked me, how can you buy eggs? How can you buy eggs in a shop? Because if an animal is kosher, but if it's a trefa, it's very sick, let's say, so then everything that comes out of it will be also not kosher because it'll be trefa. So there we rely on what's called rov, the majority. The majority of animals are healthy. We don't question an animal's health until we can prove otherwise. Unless you can prove that this specific egg came from a sick, dying chicken, then we don't see any reason why it should have. Therefore, chicken eggs are by default kosher. So that's how you come with kosher products. You can see we still got 10 minutes time, so maybe already time to a little bit dive into, somebody mentioned checking eggs for blood. Very good. You're absolutely right. When we crack open an egg, we look at the egg and see if there's any blood spot, if there are any blood spots in it. Nowadays, a lot of, there's a whole complicated literature, but in halacha, it was more of an issue in the past because the eggs were actually fertilized by a male rooster. Nowadays, the eggs they sell actually things that the chicken make themselves. There's no beginning of a life there. So it's definitely not an issue from the Torah. It's not real blood of a life. But we check eggs. That is a Jewish custom, but definitely. We always check eggs before we fry them if you didn't, if you forgot, if this, you don't need to worry too much about it. Anyways, I know what the situation in Sweden and Norway. I can say that here in Finland, blood spots are very rare in eggs. Like in the last 4 years we've been living here, I think we've seen it once or twice. So it's definitely the majority of eggs don't have blood spots here. Rebecca, bevakasha.
That's what I was going to say. I've not noticed any blood spots in eggs in Norway, but I've noticed them in the UK. So
Yeah.
probably different practices.
Remember that as well. I lived in the UK for quite a few years, and especially the brown eggs seem to have spots very often. Yes. So I thought there's a few minutes left, maybe to wrap up or to like give a little bit of an introduction into the next week already. So you come home with your products. You might have kosher meat from the kosher shop, which is this kosher stamp on it. You might have vegetables. You might have different things at home. But it's still not simple. Yeah, you can't just start eating it the way you want and how you want. What's missing? You brought all the food and you know that the food is kosher and brought it at home. But what needs to be at home so that you can actually start cooking it and eating it?
Kosher dishes.
Very good. So let's check that I don't. So this is going to be really the main point of the coming shiurim. Of the next shiur? How do you keep your home kosher? You have everything, the products you bring to your home will obviously be kosher, but that's not enough. You have to have, you need to have a kosher kitchen, right? And the main reason for this is that whenever you cook something in a pot, in a pan, then that pan or pot is considered having absorbed in it the taste of the food that you cooked. And therefore, if you cook something non-kosher, let's say, in a pan, that pan is not kosher. There might be ways to make it kosher, that's called kashering, but for the moment it's not kosher, and you will not be allowed to cook kosher food in it. So that's where the whole concept of the kosher kitchen comes. And that's why we will learn in the coming weeks. We separate the vessel, we separate the pots, the pans, the plates, everything into its right place, and with the whole system. And that brings you to the whole world of the kosher kitchen. And what's a really, really important thing in the kosher kitchen? What two things you keep separate?
Meat and dairy.
Meat and dairy, very good. So that will be next week's shiur. Basar v'chalav. What are the rules? And how do we apply them in practice? And that'll also be a chance to discuss. A lot of people already last year were asking me about the 6 hours and the 3 hours. So we'll see there's a whole process of the meat. Once you have kosher meat, which we discussed, how do you make sure you don't mix it with milk? What if you are mixing it? What if you did mix it? What if two people are eating together and one is eating meat, one is eating milk? What if you've eaten meat? How long do you have to wait, if at all, to eat milk? What if you eat milk? How much do you have to wait before eating meat? And all the different specific things related to that. Okay, so we finished early today, but I'm very happy to take any questions on this subject anybody might have before we call it a day.
Can you repeat what you just said?
I was just giving a quick idea of what we're talking about next week so that you can come prepared to the lesson. So we're just going to cover the world of basar b'chalav, meat and milk, how it applies to cooking them together, eating them one after the other, eating them simultaneously at the same table, two different people, one eating meat, one eating milk, business with meat and milk, all different things that are related to meat and milk. Okay, any questions related to the text that you've read? I hope everybody's read the chapter. So everybody should read for next lesson everything that it says there about mixing meat and milk. Okay, All the best, everyone. Kol tov.
Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.
What up, Abby?
שבוע טוב, כל טוב.
תודה רבה.
Shabbat tov. Bye.
תודה רבה.